Hello, everyone. This is Marie Huggins with the Mobility Collective again, and I'm back with another installment of our Power Five series where we take 5 proverbial minutes to get to know some of our awe-inspiring Black leaders in the global mobility industry. So today we have Mrs. Glynnis Swan of Microsoft, aka My Ladybug, joining us today. You didn't think I was going to throw that in there, did you?
No, I did not.
Thank you for joining us, Glynnis. How are you today?
I am good. Thank you. Trying to stay warm and dry today
Yes,
with
ma'am.
this crazy weather.
Yes, ma'am. Let's start with a quick intro and tell
Mhm,
us a little bit about yourself, who you are, a
mhm,
description of, what you do right now within global mobility, and a little bit about how long you've been a part of the global mobility
mhm.
industry.
Sure. So I am Glynnis Swan. I am an immigrant to the U.S. From the small, beautiful island of Bermuda. I've been in the U.S. for, let me just say, over 20 years. I'll leave it at that. Uh, But I've been in the mobility industry for about 16 years, just over 16 years.
Hmm.
Um, I work for Microsoft, as you stated, and I am a program manager, mobility program manager in that space. Um, and I have kind of like a dual role. So on one side, I manage the intern program, so the domestic and U.S. interns and all the relocation, and logistics related to that. But then I
Hmm.
also have another hat as in the Center of Excellence for Supplier Management. So I work to make sure that all of our vendors and vendor partners and suppliers for the mobility space, not just interns, but the whole mobility space, I work
Hmm.
to make sure that we have the best vendors that we need.
And I'm sure you're the best at it because that's
I,
you.
I, I try. I'm just gonna say I learn from the best.
Now, as you spoke, you said you've been in the industry about 16 years. So what I want
Mhm,
you to do is kind of take us back and
mhm.
tell our audience a little bit about how you were introduced to global mobility.
Sure. So when I moved to the US, my first job was at Ernst& Young. I was not an accounting major. I actually majored in international business and human resources. Uh, so I don't know how I ended up in a tax department doing arbitrage rebate, right? And not many people even know what arbitrage rebate is. So I won't bore you with that. But it was a very small department within Ernst& Young.
Hmm.
And so Ernst& Young was selling the department. And I didn't know what I was going to do. I had worked at, a large big four company for at that point almost 8 years. I had, two young kids and I just needed a job.
Hmm.
So I reached out to my network and there was a lady who I knew. She used to work at EY and she had gone across the street to Deloitte. Literally, Ernst& Young and Deloitte were right across the street from each other. And she was in the tax department there, but she worked in what was called assignment services,
Hmm.
global mobility.
Right.
So I called her. I was like, Rebecca, I need a job. Like, can you get me a job over there? And
Hmm.
she said, yeah. So do you know anything about global mobility? And I was like, I was like, what? And she said, like expats and stuff. I was like, yeah, I know everything about expats because being born and raised in Bermuda, international business was like a major source of income. And so
Hmm.
we had tons of expats in Bermuda. Literally, my grandmother's house, she rented out one of her apartments to a British expat family. So I like grew up with their kids, right? So I was like, oh yeah,
Hmm.
girl, I know everything about expats. I know
Hmm.
nothing. I soon found out I knew nothing. So, she gets me, she takes my resume, I get an interview, I had a ton of interviews. I joined and I learned everything from the ground up, all things assignment services. all things tax, everything short of actually preparing the tax return for
Mm-hmm.
assignees.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I got my start in mobility.
Wow, all this time I've known you and I never even knew that story.
Yeah.
Wow. That's ve-
So,
that's really interesting, and it really mimics the story of so many people that I know that have gotten into this industry, because there are very few people who say,
mhm.
you know, when I grow up, I want to be in global mobility, right?
Yeah.
Some shape, form, or fashion, you just kind of land here, right? So it's
I,
always interesting to, for me to listen to other
yeah.
people talk about how they got their start here. Now,
Yeah.
as long as I've known you, you've always had your hands in many pots, right? And I know your full-time job is with Microsoft, and you're also
Mm-hmm.
part of Black in HR, and you've
Mm-hmm.
been recognized as truly committed to DE&I efforts, and heavily involved in the conference circuit, right?
Yes.
So, with all of that going on, tell me some of the contributions you're most proud of within this global
Mhm.
mobility space.
Well, definitely. So you hit the nail on the head when you said, diversity, right? Because one of the things I noticed is to everyone else who's looking, like if you go to a conference, you may not see many people that look like us, you
Mm-hmm.
know, um, attended the conferences or speaking or otherwise having leadership roles. But there are a lot of people that look like us, right? We're mostly doing we're on the front lines, right? Doing the
The
work.
real work.
You said it, right? But one of the things that I'm proud of is when I joined Deloitte, shortly after I joined Deloitte, the world started outsourcing, especially to like India. And we were tasked with working with this new, region of people that
Mm-hmm.
as Americans, I wasn't yeah, I was an American at that time. I had attained my citizenship. I had to think back, right? So I can say as Americans, right?
Mm-hmm.
We didn't typically work, with people in other regions. And so I noticed that there were a lot of difficulties. And I figured out if I was having difficulties, other people on other teams, right, or co-workers may have been having difficulties. So I kind of took the initiative back then to research, how do you work with people in India? Like literally, I Googled, how do you work with people in India?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I started coming across diversity,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it wasn't the first time I heard the term because I actually took a diversity course in my undergrad when I was at University of Texas at Arlington, but it was the first time that it had like some practical meaning to me, and that's when I dug into what truly diversity and inclusion is. And I started joining local organizations and volunteering, to find out not only how I can better work with these people, but how my peers,
Mm-hmm.
can work with that. So that's when diversity became instrumental to me. Now, I told you I started out, on the consulting side of um, assignment services and global mobility. But partway through my stint at Deloitte, I actually transitioned onto the corporate side and I worked with developing the strategy internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that I was tasked with was looking at surveys and seeing how we can make things better. And I remember someone saying, "Oh, we need to have more females on assignment." But when I started digging into the data, not only was it just more females that needed representation, there was little to no representation for people of color, for
Mm-hmm.
younger generations, right? We were
Yes,
still
ma'am.
in that historical, typical 40 or 50-year-old white male, going on assignment. So I made it my mission to make sure that everyone knew, the eligibility for going on assignments. And I was actually able to increase not only female participation, in mobility by over 18%, but diverse people of color and younger generations. I held lunch and learns, webinars, all sorts of things to let people know what they had to do. And I was actually able to increase that by almost 30% within 18 months. So that's one of my greatest achievements.
Well, that now see another thing I didn't know about you. I mean, it falls in line with a lot of things that I do know about you. I may not have known that particular story, but one of the common things that I have seen in you and everything that you do is connection. And so why is that so important to you?
I think, Marie, it's super important to me because when I started at Deloitte, I told you I had zero, experience.
Right.
And there were two people in particular that, helped to train me from the ground up. They took the time out to teach me every term, in global mobility. And then of course, as I got into other organizations, right, like Xerox, right, I met people like you. Well, I met you. And, I became your ladybug, right? But you taught me, you taught me things that other people did not take the time out to teach me. And then fast forward to today, right? I may go to a conference, I may be speaking, I may not be speaking, but I see people who I used to work with, who I probably even reported to me, that never took the time to teach me, to mentor me, to help me. There were times I had to beg and plead to do things, and even reach into my own pocket, right, to pay my own way because nobody believed in me, or advocated for me. And so I believe that the connection is important because I don't think that because I had to struggle, other people should have to struggle.
Right.
So if it is to help someone to get into, a new role, in mobility, if it is to help a diverse supplier who no one wants to talk to because, like, I don't know you, you don't look like us, right? I'm gonna talk to them, right? I'm gonna share my knowledge. I'm gonna, make connections, and do whatever I have to do to help, to increase the diversity in this industry.
And that is critical work that you're doing, because had it not been for people like you doing that, then we wouldn't be where we are today. We just need that same thought process and that same way of bringing action.
Yeah.
We need that to be employed by multiples and multiples and multiples of people to continue to keep making the advancements that we've been making. But I applaud you for being so aware, not just of what your situation was prior to the mentoring, right? But to not lose focus and not lose sight of people who would be in that exact same situation and would need that same sort of guidance. So I applaud you for that.
Thank you.
And in keeping with, as we wrap up, in keeping with the theme of this whole Power 5 series, I'd like you to reflect. This is Black History Month. Just reflect and tell us maybe a Black history moment that has been most meaningful or impactful to you in your life.
Okay. Well, the first thing I want to think of is like the abolishment of slavery, because if it wasn't for that,
right?
We could just start there.
I co-sign on that.
I mean, we could start with that one. But when I think of the most impactful, right, I actually think back to 1994 when Nelson Mandela was elected president of, in South Africa. And even going back further than that, in why it's so impactful and why it stands out to me in history is because I think it was like February-ish of 1990, right? He was released from prison after being in there for 27 years. I was a freshman in high school. Don't be trying to calculate, people, don't be trying to calculate my age, whatever. But I was a freshman in high school, right? And when he was elected, it was May of 1994. I was graduating from high school, right?
Oh, wow.
So that snippet of history, right, is very it stands out in my mind. But I remember watching, I was still a student back in Bermuda, and I remember watching that with my grandmother. And
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother and I were very, very close. And she was also a very impactful person in my life. But as he was, elected, it basically taught me about resilience, right? About
Yes.
faith,
Yes.
right? And authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
And not only did he, embody those things, but that was my grandmother, right? And so when I sit back and think about all the things that we've watched together, all the, things in history, that's why that is so impactful to me. So those are three things that I try to carry, going forward in my life today, right? Resiliency,
Mm-hmm.
authenticity, right? And
Mm-hmm.
faith.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And it was an unexpected moment.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have no way of anticipating how people will answer these questions, but certainly it was unexpected, but definitely a pleasure to hear you talk about it and correlate it with your grandmother.
Yeah.
Now, I know you're busy, so I just want to thank you again. I know you have all the things going on right now.
Yes.
And the fact that you took a few minutes out of your day today to talk to our audience, to speak with me, and even share with me some things that I didn't know about you, I can only say thank you because it definitely means a lot. And it is just part of the process of continuing what you do every day, which is pouring into people, right?
Yes.
Someone's going to see this and be inspired by your story. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And to our audience, thank you for joining us again today. And if you thought this one was great, then check out some of our other ones. And until next time, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you, Marie.
Thank you, Glenn.